Welcome, guys. This is Motivate Otis, a channel where we address different topics in occupational therapy and in occupational science. My name is Tongai Chichaya. I'm an assistant professor in occupational therapy. Today, I'm very pleased to be joined by Dr. Ana Malfitano. Today, we're going to be having an interesting discussion. So don't go anywhere. Stay tuned. I promise you it's going to be an exciting one. So just to start with brief introductions, Dr. Ana Malfitano is an associate professor in the occupational therapy department and also in the postgraduate occupational therapy program at Federal University of Sao Carlos, all the way in Brazil. Apart from that, Dr. Ana Malfitano is also the current editor for the Brazilian Journal of Occupational Therapy. And at one point, I was actually privileged to be a reviewer for that journal, but that's the story for another day. And coming more towards what we're going to be focusing on today, Dr. Ana Malfitano was the keynote speaker at the World Federation of Occupational Therapy Congress in 2022. That was the 18th WFOT Congress. It's actually almost a year now. It was actually in August 2022 in Paris. So from that keynote address, there were many issues that came from there. It was really packed. And I came up with one word, and the word was quotidiano.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we're going to hear more about that in this discussion. And I mean, the importance of recognizing the diversity or the plurality of vocabularies, the knowledges, as in ways of knowing in occupational therapy, the different cultures, diversity of cultures, recognizing that and getting to understand that no way of knowing is superior than the other, but each way of knowing is unique based on the context in which it is developed. So we're going to hear more about that, but I don't want to talk too much. I'm going to allow you, Ana, thank you so much for coming. I'm going to allow you to introduce yourself in your own words.
Oh, thanks so much, Tongai. It's a great pleasure to participate in this conversation that I think it's always an opportunity to share ideas and to come with thoughts from the South, from Latin America,
Yeah,
that I
sure.
think it's something really important when we talk about occupational therapy globally. Yes,
Yeah.
coming from other places in the world. And thanks for the presentation. I think what I'd like to add, thinking of the dimensions of Latin America and global South in occupational therapy, I think the first point is that our path here in terms of research is really connected with the postgraduate program in occupational therapy here in our university. Yeah, we are the unique page in occupational therapy in Latin America, considering specific studies in occupational therapy. And I think this is an important thing related to the knowledge production in occupational therapy, coming from the specificity of our actions as professionals and also our knowledge production that needs always to be connected with this diversity, plurality that you mentioned in my opinion. And associated with the postgraduate program, we have also the Brazilian Journal of Occupational Therapy that I have the pleasure to be the editor. And this year, we just received the first impact factor from Web of Science.
Wow.
We are already on the Scopus database, but this year we had the impact factor, and we are very happy, and we are the unique journal that doesn't come from the English language as the first language to achieve this kind of impact in the occupational therapy field.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So, thinking of diversity, different knowledges, I'd like to invite everyone to know the Brazilian Journal, to read our articles, to publish with us, because I think it's part of our path in terms of diversity of knowledge in occupational therapy.
Wow, wow, wow.
And I think, considering myself, the presentation of me, my important point in terms of my trajectory in occupational therapy is related to the development and the discussion of social occupational therapy. And so I'm part of we call by Metuia Network. Metuia is a Brazilian indigenous word that means friend, partnerships.
Friends.
And yeah, and this is a network that we have built here in Brazil, considering researchers, students, professionals in social occupational therapy. So I'm part of this network and advocating for social occupational therapy in our field.
That's interesting. That's interesting. I think you have already sort of like steered this conversation towards what we want to focus on today. So today, guys, we're gonna be discussing about social occupational therapy. So yes, and I know this was developed in Brazil and maybe other parts of Latin America. Well, what exactly is social occupational therapy?
Yeah, social occupational therapy is a proposition of theoretical and methodological actions in occupational therapy to put the social question in the center of our concerns. And so if we think we are professionals who work with occupations, activities, everyday life, cotidiano, as the Latin word that we use a lot here to talk about where we work, thinking of social participation, social inclusion, engagement, occupational engagement. So if we do this, we have to consider the social question, where people live. The context is not just something in the back of our considerations. It is the center of our action. And so social occupational therapy proposes this, to consider the social question as the center of our concerns, to do different kind of actions. Of course, it depends on the necessity of people, what people need, what people want, what people can do. But to start the discussion about everyday life, occupation, we have to consider the social question. And then we think of considering this, how to do a reading of this society, what is essential to discuss about our actions, and also what kind of methodology, what kind of action we can do, considering the social question of people live, of where we live, and all the contradictions as part of this. And then I like to say that I think there are two axes very important in considering social occupational therapy. The first one would be more theoretical in terms of what kind of references do we have to do occupational therapy. And so social occupational therapy can be considered a critical perspective to inform occupational therapists working in different fields, including the health field, of course, but also in the education field, in the welfare system, and the justice, and other examples of places where we are able to work. And the second point that we advocate in social occupational therapy is occupational therapists are not just only health professionals. We have abilities to work in other places. Because if I'm considering the everyday life, the occupation, to promote social participation, occupational engagement, we can choose the vocabulary, consider our histories and theoretical backgrounds. This is part of many, many different sectors, not just related to the health. And so we advocate, and we have some experiences and political actions also to include more occupational therapists in the welfare system, in the justice system, in the education fields, and other places. So I think these two axes are something important to understand as a theoretical critical framework, and to advocate to be beyond the healthcare system.
That's very interesting. If I can just take a step back to ask, what led to the development of social occupational therapy in Brazil? What was missing from the occupational therapy that has already been in existence?
This is very important, I think, considering our history, because we have the history, as many countries in Latin America, related to the civil dictatorship. It was a mark of our history, our development. And at that moment, that in Brazil, it was for 21st year, between 64 to 85. So considering this moment, what we had, it was the beginning of occupational therapy in the country, considering this dictatorship environment and in all places. And what was very important, it was the discussion of the necessity of a political view of professionals, in all professionals. And so we had many occupational therapists involved in the discussion about the democracy, about the social rights, the human rights of many people. And so this aspect of critical perspectives, highlighting the political level, was the motivation, if I can use this word, to say we are not able just to reproduce biomedical actions. This is not what our society needs. What we need professionals involved and considering the politics as part of the everyday life of everyone. Especially in a very sad moment like that. So it was the environment to start this history.
Great, that's fantastic. Now, my next question now is, somebody might...
May I just add one other thing?
Yeah, it's fine.
Because I think sometimes people listen it and say, okay, so it's very specific related to the Latin America because of the dictatorship.
That's a good point.
So we don't have any relation with this kind of approach in occupational therapy. And so I think the history, of course, is really, really important. And
I think that history is sort of like shared, especially in many places in the global South.
Exactly. But also, when we emphasize the politics as part of the concerns of occupational therapists, we are talking about all of inequalities that we have been living in all the globe. So if we think some rich countries or the North countries, we are also talking about inequalities and talking about many things related to the necessity of a political view. So this was very important as a mark of our history, but it's something that I believe is part of our contemporary life to talk about the politics.
So in other words, you're saying this approach is not just a uniquely Brazilian approach. It's an approach that can actually be adopted elsewhere, as long as there are inequalities in service provision, in the way of life, Is that what you're saying?
Yes, what I think is
fantastic. Right. Thank you very much for that. So my next question now is, some people might hear social occupational therapy, and then probably what will come to their mind will be social work. Or maybe there are some critics who have said something against the approach of social occupational therapy. What is the difference between social occupational therapy and social work?
Yeah, this is a constant question that we listen, and I think it's important because what is behind of this question, in my opinion, is really related to the identity of occupational therapists.
Right.
Because we also can ask, what is the difference between the physiotherapists and occupational therapists work in a rehabilitation center? What is the difference of psychologists and occupational therapists in a mental health service? So I think this is part of our history, thinking of this. And for me, the answer is the same for all these fields, including the social field. The question is, our contribution is to work with the everyday life, the occupation of the people. And social workers don't do this. They do a lot of very important things, but they are more connected with the benefits that the governments offer for population. They are talking about the vulnerability in a bigger sense, trying to understand how to promote political actions related to social protection. And what occupational therapists add is actions related to the everyday life, to the cotidiano of people.
The occupational performance itself.
Exactly, to navigate the system, to try to help people to find ways of living in this unequal society. So our experience here is really partnerships with social workers, and it's something that usually they recognize as an addition. We don't have a conflict here, for example, with occupational therapists working in the welfare system. What we have is this kind of recognition. They usually say, well, I don't know how to do a group of people doing activities together, and occupational therapists do this in a very good way. I don't know how to manage this discussion about the everyday life, the occupation, to try to help people to organize themselves based on what we are able to offer and based on the network of politics that we have in the city, for example. And so I think if we know what we do and what kind of contributions we can offer, we are able to discuss with many professionals, including social workers, about our contributions.
Without having any turf wars to say, no, this is our territory. No, that's... Thank you so much for that. I think you've really put it nicely that whatever interventions that are coming from occupational therapy, the central theme there is to promote occupational engagement in occupations or participation in occupations, which is our sort of like our main role, our main focus really, with either individuals, groups, or with communities.
Exactly. And if you think about this, the occupational engagement, the social participation, we are talking about the structure of society. And so the inequalities are always present. I think this is a theoretical background, very important in social occupational therapy. When we do social reading of our historical time, we see inequalities, we see exploitation, and this is part of our history. And the question is, we are not able to fix it because we are just an actor in this big scene. But how to deal with this situation, trying to consider these points thinking of better conditions of life for everybody. So if you think about the social question as the center of this discussion, we are able to manage, as you said, the occupations, the everyday life of people, thinking of occupational engagement, social participation, and other things that we
and then
can...
there's lots of occupational justice issues that we can
Exactly.
actually be able to address in that direction.
Yeah.
Wow.
And another question, Tongai, usually together with the difference related to social work, is people saying, well, but social is part of occupational therapy. Why we need to say social occupational therapy?
Yeah.
And this is another interesting point, because I think our history shows that the social is not always part of occupational therapy. It should be. But considering the biomedical model and many things that we live in a neoliberal society, considering individualism and other values, it's not always present. And so I think the first point is we should mark social as part of our professional and our actions in different places. And the second point is, when we talk about social occupational therapy, we are highlighting other fields beyond the healthcare. And so we are putting the possibilities of actions in other fields with other politics and with other demands of people that we are able to deal with. And so,
wow,
I believe
wow.
it's important.
Thank you so much for that. Let's bring this home a little bit. Are there any examples where social occupational therapy has been provided or has been delivered, which we can then say, okay, this is a demonstration that these are the differences, or this is the impact that social occupational therapy has on communities?
Yeah, we usually here have a project in partnership with a public school, elementary school, with children and adolescents, trying to discuss the inclusion of children and some specific children that they are not studying, and including poor children and youth who are not in the school because of some economic barrier, but it also could be some children and youth with disabilities and other situations that they are not able to go to the school. And our actions are how to create an environment that children and youth would like to continue studying, and how to promote a better environment in the school, supporting the teachers and the persons who work in the school, and also offering interesting things for the students in the school. I think it could be something that occupational therapists could do. For example, if you are working the primary health care, this is part of the work of occupational therapists here in Brazil. Consider some partnerships with schools, for example. If you are working the welfare system, also it could be something related to the network that we can do, and including the specific work in the education field related to inclusion and other things.
Wow. Thank you so much for that example. And I know you have many more examples, and I know there are publications, which some of them, I think I'll just put them in the description for the video so that our audience can be able to access them.
Another example that I think it's good to think of other settings of actions, it's, for example, in mental health and the question about people using drugs. We have here some centers of rehabilitations related to places where we have a team with many professionals, including occupational therapists, working with people who are doing use of drugs in different levels. And one thing that it's always very important when we talk about this kind of service is how the professional are able to understand the context of life and the everyday life of these people, because there are a lot of treatments related to the models and the assessments related to how many drugs do you use, how do you use this, and trying to control this kind of use, what is helpful for some people. But what we have here, like an example, is it's always connected with the everyday life of this person. And so when you understand what kind of activities you do every day, what is the moment that you have the opportunity to use more, to use less, and what kind of support you have for this. And so this is an occupational therapeutic approach in this kind of services that usually they say the theoretical framework of social occupational therapy helps me to put the quotidiano, the everyday life of this person in the center of the evaluation, to try to do the discussion of changing in the everyday life, to discuss the possibilities of the use of drugs. And so, and then we have the question around the analysis of the network of the persons. For example, when I need help, where I can find something. And so sometimes it's like a formal things. For example, I came to the rehabilitation center. If I need some help, I have some support in the school for youth, for example, but also the informal network, some friends, some families, the church, other places that the person can identify of some part of the network. And so considering this methodology of work that occupational therapists do, evaluating the everyday life, find and identifying supports, we can try to understand how to manage it. And considering, for example, mental health services with people with drug uses, it's something that usually we have a lot of different experience helping people to manage it and to deal with it.
So in that situation, you will be looking at the service provision, at the system, rather than just the person. You're looking at the social circle.
Exactly. And I think the question is to understand the support of the person in his, her environment. And so what kind of service I have here? There are many people that the great point is, for example, I don't work and I don't study. I have nothing to do. And so the questions related to the drugs use, it's really related to occupy time and to be part of a group. And so if we help the person to identify this and what you would like to do. And so we had
occupations.
Exactly. We had a boy here in the project that he really would like to play volleyball, but he hadn't the possibility, and he was staying more and more time on the streets and considering use of drugs. And then what we started to talk with the services. What you can offer for this boy who would like to play volleyball, and what this city can do with a boy who lives here and he wants to do something and he's not able to find this thing. We went to the leisure place of management in the city to ask about this, the sport management in the downtown, and they started to say, well, I don't know, we don't have this possibility of a place to play volleyball in the city. but this is a public problem because he lives here. He is a citizenship. He has a citizenship. And so what we can do, and then we managed this discussion the political level to try to find something. And what they decided, it was to pay a place that he could go to another city very close to here to play volleyball and to start this kind of activity that he would like to do as a young man trying to do sport. But it was a kind of articulation and mediation
and advocacy as well.
Advocacy as well, exactly. Trying to show to the authorities that we have a problem. We are in a city with very bad opportunities of leisures and sports for young people. And he represents one situation, and now he is a problem in a health service because he uses drug. But the real question behind it is
those meaningful occupations.
Exactly. We don't offer meaningful occupation for him. But it was very good because we had some authorities who were worried about it and then tried to manage the situation. And he was able to go to another city to do what was meaningful for him. But we know it's not always like this. I'm sure I have another examples that they are not so good. But what I think it's important based on social occupational therapy is to put the problem in a collective way. So it's not just him. If we understand the situation like him, it was the lack of possibilities of meaningful occupations.
So and did this make a difference in his life?
Exactly. And so he stopped completely to use drugs when he started to play volleyball. And some years later, he gave up of the volleyball. It wasn't exactly what he wanted.
Occupational transitions.
Exactly. But it's part of life. Yes, no problem. But the question around the drugs use was not a problem anymore. And so this kind of political reading of the situations that I think we should have, and to do the articulation. I'm not able to create a service related to sport in the city, but I can talk, I can write a report and to say this kind of thing is happening. Someone please pay attention to this because it's the reality of people who are in the mental health services destined to people who use drugs. And so
I think it forms actually an excellent case study for the establishment of such facilities within the locality, isn't it? So that all other people who are in a similar situation as a little community, they then get that chance to participate rather than to move out of their environment and go somewhere else. But already there's a demonstration that this actually works.
Exactly. And I think what sometimes is difficult is the professional recognizes it as part of his or her work. And so my role, it's not just to promote an individual clinical moment with the boy who uses drugs. My role is also to understand it based on his occupations and everyday life, and to try to do actions, even if I'm not able to fix the situation, but I'm able to write a report. I'm able to say, well, I have here a lot of boys in the same situation, and this is something that it's important for our mental health.
And that's the resourcefulness of occupational therapy, isn't it?
Exactly. But to do this, we have to recognize our political role in occupational therapy.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ana, for these examples and these insights. As we draw close to the end of this discussion, there's a question that I generally want to ask all my guests who come on Motivate OTs. How do you see the future of occupational therapy and occupational science? You could answer this in terms of your own context, or you can go global context as well, it's equally good.
Oh, thank you. Well, I think thinking of occupational therapy, the big question for us is why do we need occupational therapists in this society, in this historical time? If you are able to answer it, I think we are doing a good job in terms of a social contribution. And I think it's not possible to be indifferent in the society that we live related to inequalities, to the poor conditions of life, to the racism, to the patriarchal society. This kind of thing, they are the topics of our historical moment, considering more diversity and more equal conditions of life. And so I think the future of occupational therapy that I'd like to see is more and more people involved and putting this kind of discussion in their actions. And it also includes biomedical actions, because I think occupational therapists, part of us, have the ability to develop good biomedical actions, helping people considering some actions. And they are important and they are part of occupational therapy, but they should be involved in a social reading of society, the consideration of what this person is, where he or she lives, and what kind of actions and occupations they are able to do. And so if you do this, if you consider this, I think we have many contributions informed by different models and considering different fields of actions in occupational therapy. And so I think our future could be more and more involved with the challenge of our society, of our historical time. And when I think about occupational science, I see a lot of critical perspectives that have been developing and informing occupational therapy. And for me, the future is something more that they go together. The occupational science going together with occupational therapy, and not something different, but trying to inform us about very possible perspectives that we can have, and developing knowledge that we can exchange, that we can apply, but in my perspective, in a composition that I think it's something that we have to do.
Thank you so much, Anna. I mean, this has been fantastic. It has been really great to listen to you talk about social occupational therapy. I mean, it's really important because I mean this approach of addressing individual needs. It's like we'll be living a huge slice of people's life and people's well-being if we concentrate on the individual and neglect that social aspect, because we don't like live in isolation. We actually live in social environments, and our occupations are embedded in social life. So thank you so much for that. I think we've now come to the end of this discussion. So there we are, guys. Thank you so much for your time. So thank you so much, Anna, for your time and for these valuable insights on social occupational therapy that you've shared with us.
Thank you, and I'm available to continue this conversation. Thank you.
Yes, I know. All right, thank you so much. Okay, bye, guys.